My husband ran off with his mistress until I dropped the DNA results that shattered him. Madison Lee sat quietly at the edge of the dinner table, fingers nervously twisting the napkin in her lap. The soft clinking of silverware mixed with polite laughter filled the upscale dining room where friends and family had gathered to celebrate Tom's latest promotion. To everyone else, it was a night of triumph. But for Madison, the atmosphere felt heavy and suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Tom sat across from her, his smile bright and confident, but Madison's gaze caught something colder in his eyes, something distant and unrecognizable. For years, Madison had poured herself into supporting Tom's ambitious career. She'd sacrificed her own dreams, rearranged her life around his needs, and quietly endured the dismissive comments from people who barely saw her. Not just acquaintances, but even those closest to her. No one seemed to take her seriously. Even Tom, whom she had trusted more than anyone, viewed her as a mere background figure, the quiet wife, invisible and easily replaced. The sudden realization that she was living a life shadowed by invisibility stung deeply, but nothing compared to the crushing blow she was about to face. Just as the main course was served, Tom stood, clearing his throat, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. With an arrogant smirk, he began to introduce someone new. "This is Victoria," he said, gesturing toward the woman who had quietly slipped into the room moments before. Victoria smiled, poised and flawless in a way that made Madison's heart clench. "She's been my assistant for the past year, and more recently, my partner." The words hit Madison like a punch to the stomach. The room fell into an uneasy silence before murmurs erupted among the guests. Madison's cheeks burned hot with embarrassment. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but the sting of shock stole her voice. Victoria's eyes gleamed with something triumphant, as if this moment had been a long time coming. Tom's gaze locked onto Madison's, cold and unrelenting. "You know, Madison, you were useful for a time, but everyone moves on eventually." His tone was cruel and deliberate as he leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You'll never amount to much outside what I gave you. You'll be alone before you realize it." Laughter bubbled up from some of the guests, while others exchanged uncomfortable glances. Madison sat frozen, humiliated and trembling. The room that was supposed to feel like home suddenly felt like a cage, and everyone was watching as her world unraveled in silence. Tom's betrayal was no longer hidden, and the wound it left was raw and bleeding. But beneath the shame and disbelief, a flicker of resolve began to form inside Madison's heart, a quiet ember waiting to ignite. After that humiliating dinner, Madison's world felt like it had crumbled entirely. The echo of Tom's cruel words replayed in her mind relentlessly, each repetition amplifying the ache of betrayal and the weight of invisibility he had endured for so long. She withdrew from the bustling social circles she once quietly blended into, retreating to the solitude of her small bedroom, where tears came more easily than words. Every glance at her reflection showed not the woman she'd once been, but a shadow wearing the mask of a broken wife. The disbelief gnawed at her. How had she spent all those years supporting a man who so easily discarded her dignity in front of those she cared about? Friends reached out, their voices soft with pity and half-hearted reassurances, but Madison couldn't bring herself to accept their comfort. The knife was not just Tom's betrayal. It was the fact that everyone around had silently watched, taken his side, or worse, whispered behind her back. At work, colleagues who once greeted her with cordial nods now avoided her altogether. Gossip spread like wildfire about the quiet, pitiful wife, whose husband had shamelessly paraded his mistress. A cruel joke among acquaintances, but a devastating reality for Madison. The humiliation felt suffocating. Victoria's name became a tormenting refrain, mentioned with smirks or whispered secrets, further isolating Madison in a world that seemed designed to remind her of her shame. The nights were especially hard, silent, long hours where her mind raced through memories, questioning every moment, wondering how she had missed the signs. The overwhelming sense of betrayal planted seeds of doubt about herself, her worth, and the life she had built. Each day presented a new obstacle, a strange look in a colleague's eye, a family member pretending not to know or care, a sudden absence of support where she expected it most. Yet, as much as the pain bruised her soul, there was a flicker of something else beneath the surface. Somewhere in those tears and sleepless nights, Madison whispered to herself that this could not be how her story ended. There was a flame burning quietly, a desperate need not only to survive, but to reclaim her identity beyond the shadow Tom tried to cast over her. She began to notice inconsistencies, the stories Tom told, the changing dates of Victoria's arrival as assistant, the unsettlement in various conversations about the children. Madison started researching on her own, cautious but determined. She learned about DNA testing, accounts from women who had uncovered hidden truths. The thought of investigating the paternity of Tom's supposed child with Victoria began to seed itself as a path not just to truth, but to control over her own narrative. Would the results change anything? Could they offer justice where her voice had been silenced? Though fear and doubt weighed heavily, the potential for truth gave Madison a reason to breathe again. She didn't want to just survive humiliation. She wanted to dismantle the lies built to imprison her. To anyone watching from the outside, Madison's world seemed to shatter beyond repair. But for those paying attention, beneath the quiet despair, a storm was gathering, a need for answers, a fight for dignity that no amount of gossip or mockery could extinguish. Her journey was about to take a turn, and in the ruins of betrayal, the first delicate threads of hope began weaving a new future. If you've ever felt invisible or underestimated, remember Madison's quiet strength in her darkest hours, a reminder that even in the deepest pain, the seeds of change are waiting to be nurtured. Driven by a fragile hope and a flicker of resolve, Madison quietly began to take tentative steps toward reclaiming control over her life. The days following the cruel dinner were clouded with uncertainty, but she refused to let despair swallow her whole. The first challenge was overcoming the paralyzing fear of confrontation and judgment. Finding a reputable clinic that could privately conduct DNA testing wasn't easy, but Madison persevered, navigating countless calls and appointments while cloaked in secrecy. When the test was finally booked, the weight of what she was about to uncover pressed heavily on her. What if the results confirmed her worst fears? What if Tom had managed to manipulate every aspect of her reality, leaving her grasping at illusions? Yet the alternative, living in ignorance, feared her even more. In that quiet uncertainty, Madison found her first spark of courage, to seek truth. No matter how painful, days turned into weeks as she tried to keep her life moving forward, despite the emotional turmoil beneath the surface. Simple tasks became mountains. Returning to work meant navigating sideways glances and carefully avoiding gossip. She felt like an outsider in her own world, constantly reminded by smiles that didn't reach the eyes and whispered comments she pretended not to hear. Even family gatherings started to feel like battles where her presence was tolerated, but never truly welcomed. Madison's attempts to rebuild small pockets of normalcy were met with new setbacks. A job interview that once filled her with hope ended with polite rejection, the vague, "not a good fit" line echoing in her mind as she left the room, feeling more invisible than ever. A few supportive texts from friends were met with overwhelmed silence. She wasn't ready to open up yet. Each closed door solidified the haunting feeling that perhaps Tom's cruel words were closer to the truth than she wanted to admit. Yet amidst these struggles, moments as light pierced the darkness. One afternoon, a kind stranger at the clinic, a nurse who sensed her pain but offered nothing but quiet support, reminded Madison that she was not alone. A weathered book on resilience, discovered on a dusty bookstore shelf during a rare outing, spoke to her soul in unexpected ways, offering stories of others who had risen from shattering betrayal. These small encounters were lifelines, whispering that hope could still exist even in broken places. And so, Madison waited for the results with a conflicted heart. The test kit sat on her nightstand, the envelope a symbol of both dread and potential liberation. Each night before sleep, she rehearsed what she might say, the confrontation she hoped would someday restore her dignity. But uncertainty hung like a cloud, and sometimes the simplest tasks felt impossible. The looming answers promised change, but the suspense clung to her like a shadow. Her journey was far from over. This was just the first step into an unknown future. Madison knew she could not let herself sink into despair. The fight to reclaim her life had only just begun. Each moment of doubt was met now with a quiet promise. Whatever the truth, she would face it with a strength she was only beginning to recognize within herself. If you've ever felt lost in a sea of uncertainty, know that courage often starts with one small step, sometimes invisible to the world, but monumental to the soul. Madison's story reminds us all that even when the path is unclear, resilience can take root quietly, ready for the moment it's needed most. The day Madison received the results of the DNA test was both a moment steeped in suspense and trembling hope. Her hands shook as she carefully sliced open the sealed envelope, and the quiet room seemed to hold its breath with her. The paper inside bore a truth that would shatter illusions and reshape her entire world, not only exposing deceit, but offering clarity she had so desperately sought. The test revealed, unequivocally, that Tom was not the biological father of the child he claimed with Victoria. The realization hit Madison like a tidal wave, toppling the fragile foundations of lies he had constructed around her. The weight of this revelation was surreal. Madison found herself at what felt like the absolute bottom, a place where indignity, betrayal, and shame collided in an intense storm. The humiliation she had already endured now had added a layer of heartbreak deeper than she could have imagined. Tom had not only betrayed her emotionally, but lived a lie that pretended to honor a family that wasn't truly his. The sting wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about stolen trust and fabricated identities. In the days that followed, Madison's emotions spiraled between despair and determination. She reached out discreetly to a few trusted allies, old friends who had seen her through better days, and one courageous lawyer who encouraged her to prepare for what was next. But beyond legal proceedings and quiet consultations, Madison wrestled internally with fear. Fear of how far Tom and Victoria would go to protect their lies, fear of being dismissed once again, and fear of the public spectacle this truth could become. Yet beneath the fear, her resolve hardened. Madison knew she needed to reclaim her dignity publicly, to confront the man who had mocked her worth in front of so many. It was time to break the silence that had allowed Tom's deception to fester unchecked. Carefully, she began to reach out to family and close friends, gathering a small circle of support, those who, although shocked, finally saw Madison through the clear light of truth rather than the haze of Tom's influence. Soon, the moment arrived. A meeting arranged under the tense pretext of a simple family discussion. When Tom and Victoria appeared, Madison met their gazes without flinching, the DNA results folded neatly in her hand. The room crackled with anticipation, voices hushed, as she held the floor and with calm conviction laid out the facts, a reveal that stunned everyone present. Tom's confident veneer cracked immediately. His denial was rapid but hollow, and the weight of exposure pressed visibly against his pride. Victoria, who had flaunted her triumph for so long, shrank beneath the gravity of undeniable truth. The stunned faces of friends and family around the table morphed from surprise to a hesitant respect for Madison's courage. For the first time, she was not the woman hidden in shadows, but the undeniable force demanding justice and clarity. In this crucible of confrontation and revelation, Madison found a source of power unlike any she'd known before. The humiliation and silent suffering that had once weighed so heavily lifted, replaced by a fierce determination to rewrite her story and reclaim her own identity. If you find yourself at a crossroads where humiliation and injustice threaten to consume you, remember Madison's journey through darkness, where hitting rock bottom became the spark for a fight that changed everything. Sometimes, The most profound strength is forged in the crucible of our deepest trials. Let this story inspire you to face the hardest truths with courage, because that is where true change begins. As the bitter sting of rejection settled deeper into Maya's chest, she found herself retreating into a shadowed corner of her tiny apartment, the fluorescent glow of the city lights filtering weakly through the blinds. The silence was suffocating, a relentless echo of the humiliations she'd endured just days before. The whispered insults, the snide laughter behind her back, the cold shoulders from colleagues she once called friends, it all blended into a dark symphony that played endlessly inside her mind. Yet somewhere beneath the layers of hurt and shame, a fragile ember flickered. It was a faint hope, fragile but persistent, that maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe this low point was simply the soil rich enough to allow something new and resilient to grow. Maya's fingers trembled slightly as she sifted through old photographs she had tucked away, images of herself smiling, confident, and full of dreams. Those pictures reminded her of the person she used to be, before the crushing weight of judgment had dimmed her light. Somewhere in those images was the woman she longed to become again. Determined to rediscover that spark, Maya began reaching out quietly, seeking the counsel of those who had once supported her or had stood apart, yet observant, like the elderly barista at her favorite coffee shop who always greeted her with kind, knowing eyes. She revealed fragments of her ordeal, tentatively exposing the wounds with the vulnerability of someone cautiously hoping for healing. The barista's advice was simple but profound. Sometimes the loudest failures teach us the most if we're willing to listen closer. Encouraged, Maya started attending a local community group focused on storytelling, a place where people shared the rawest chapters of their lives without fear. At first, her voice caught painfully in her throat as she told her tale of betrayal and humiliation. But as the room's empathetic silence enveloped her, layer by layer, the burden began to lift. Here, surrounded by strangers who had faced their own storms, she glimpsed the possibility of resilience, and more importantly, the power of owning one's story, flaws and all. Meanwhile, the antagonists, confident in their continued dominance, reveled in what they believed was Maya's irreversible downfall. However, murmurs of her new beginnings began to ripple unnoticed among some who had once shunned her, planting seeds of doubt about the cruelty with which they had judged her. The invisible lines of power were shifting, albeit quietly. But Maya's path was far from smooth. There were days steeped in doubt, nights echoing with the memories of scorn, moments when the fragile hope threatened to break. She stumbled, faltered, sometimes feeling like a mere shadow of herself. Yet with every setback, she began to understand that strength was not an absence of vulnerability. It was the courage to face it head-on. In these moments of self-reflection, Maya realized that the humiliation she had endured was a distorted mirror reflecting not her true worth, but the fears and insecurities of those who sought to diminish her. This insight sparked a subtle yet profound shift. If those who hurt her did so out of their own weakness, her response couldn't be to mirror their cruelty, but to rise above it with grace and resolve. If you've ever faced moments where the world seemed determined to break you, remember that sometimes the darkest chapters are just before the dawn. Maya's story is far from over, and if you're walking a similar path, hold on to that flicker of hope. Change is closer than you might think. The transformation began almost imperceptibly at first. One chilly evening, as Maya prepared to leave the community story group, she noticed a woman lingering by the door. Claire, a previously cold coworker who had been part of the circle that once whispered cruelly behind her back. Claire's eyes, usually sharp and dismissive, held something softer now, a hesitant apology in the depths. "I didn't realize how unfair I was," Claire admitted quietly. "I'm sorry you had to go through that alone." The genuine remorse in her voice caught Maya off guard, stirring an unexpected mixture of relief and bewilderment. That simple act of contrition triggered a ripple. More colleagues, emboldened perhaps by Claire's bravery or moved by Maya's vulnerability, began to approach her, not with jeers, but with tentative support. Some shared their personal stories of hardship. Others confessed doubts they once nurtured that had fueled their cruelty. The fortress of isolation that had surrounded Maya showed the first cracks. Whispers of respect replaced the murmurs of disdain. Then came the moment that would shift the tide entirely. The company announced a public presentation event designed to celebrate perseverance and innovation. On a seemingly impulsive decision, Maya submitted her proposal to share her story and insights on resilience. To her astonishment, she was accepted. The day of the presentation was thick with tension. The same room where she had once faced ridicule now awaited her speech with bated breath. As Maya stepped to the podium, her heart pounded, not with fear, but with fierce determination. She began recounting her journey, the humiliations, the doubts, her lowest moments, and the quiet, stubborn will to overcome. Her voice, steady and sincere, wove a tapestry of pain and hope. Each word seemed to strip away years of scorn, revealing strength that couldn't be ignored. Eyes that had once scorned now shimmered with empathy. Some looked away, perhaps ashamed, while others nodded in deep understanding. The impact was immediate and profound. The antagonists who had fed on her shame found themselves exposed, their cruelty laid bare within the light of Maya's courage. Their smiles faded, defensiveness replaced confidence. Some attempted to dismiss her speech as self-pity, but the room's overwhelming support silenced them. An unexpected ally, the company's CEO, stood up to commend Maya's bravery and insight, signaling a clear message. Respect and empathy were values to be embraced, not scorn. This unexpected kindness stirred a poignant realization within Maya. The power to transform her reality had never truly been in the hands of others. It had resided within her steadfastness and willingness to face her truth. Her story wasn't just about suffering. It was about mastery over the storms that threatened to drown her. This turning point didn't erase the scars, but it redefined them. They became badges of survival, symbols of a woman who refused to be broken by cruelty. If you've ever felt silenced or diminished by those around you, remember. Sometimes the greatest power lies in standing tall when the world expects you to fall. Maya's journey from shamed outcast to respected voice is a testament to the resilience waiting inside us all. Let it remind you that kindness can come from the most unexpected places, and healing often begins when you decide to share your story with courage. The days following Maya's presentation marked a new chapter, one where she began to reclaim not only her dignity, but also her place within the company, and more importantly, her own life. The shift in how others perceived her was palpable. The once cold stares softened to nods of respect, and hesitant greetings transformed into genuine conversations. Maya no longer felt like she was navigating invisible obstacles designed to trip her. Instead, paths began to clear, revealing opportunities that had been barricaded by judgment and prejudice. Yet this reclamation of strength wasn't without confrontation. The antagonists, those who had thrived on her humiliation, felt their influence slipping through their fingers. One afternoon during a tense meeting, a former critic launched a veiled jab, attempting to undermine her latest project. But Maya responded, not with anger, but with calm confidence, presenting her work with clarity that left no room for doubt. Her composure disarmed the room, and the subtle power dynamics reversed. The critics' once mocking smiles faded into reluctant acknowledgement, their tactics no longer effective against a woman who had learned to stand unshaken. Behind this growing assurance was more than just professional success. It was a deep internal transformation. Maya's nights, once restless and heavy with doubt, became times of peaceful reflection. Each day's victories, no matter how small, healed layers of old wounds, stitching together a new tapestry of self-worth. She began mentoring newcomers at work, offering support and understanding with a warmth she had longed to receive during her darkest days. In these gestures, Maya found a renewed purpose: to break the cycle of judgment and isolation, replacing it with empathy and encouragement. The company, sensing the positive impact of Maya's influence, formalized initiatives promoting inclusivity and respect, underscored by her story becoming a central example of resilience and growth. It was clear to all that the once outcast was now a cornerstone of the community. Emotions swelled in Maya one afternoon as she received an unexpected message from another woman who had suffered similarly. An anonymous note expressing gratitude for her courage and the hope it kindled. Tears blurred Maya's vision as she realized how far she had come, how many lives her strength was touching, beyond what she imagined. The journey had been brutal, but justice in its most profound form had been restored, not through vengeance or retaliation, but through integrity and unwavering perseverance. Maya had transcended the humiliation intended to break her, and turned it into a foundation for triumph and leadership. If you are fighting battles where your voice feels drowned by jeers and doubt, remember Maya's story. True victory is not just surviving hardship, but growing so profoundly that the shadows that once haunted you become the backdrop for your brightest light. Stand firm, believe in your worth, and know that justice, personal and true, can indeed be yours. The transformation began almost imperceptibly at first. One chilly evening, as Maya prepared to leave the community story group, she noticed a woman lingering by the door, Claire, a previously cold coworker who had been part of the circle that once whispered cruelly behind her back. Claire's eyes, usually sharp and dismissive, held something softer now, a hesitant apology in the depths. "I didn't realize how unfair I was," Claire admitted quietly. "I'm sorry you had to go through that alone." The genuine remorse in her voice caught Maya off guard, stirring an unexpected mixture of relief and bewilderment. That simple act of contrition triggered a ripple. More colleagues, emboldened perhaps by Claire's bravery or moved by Maya's vulnerability, began to approach her, not with jeers, but with tentative support. Some shared their personal stories of hardship. Others confessed doubts they once nurtured that had fueled their cruelty. The fortress of isolation that had surrounded Maya showed the first cracks. Whispers of respect replaced the murmurs of disdain. Then came the moment that would shift the tide entirely. The company announced a public presentation event designed to celebrate perseverance and innovation. On a seemingly impulsive decision, Maya submitted her proposal to share her story and insights on resilience. To her astonishment, she was accepted. The day of the presentation was thick with tension. The same room where she had once faced ridicule now awaited her speech with bated breath. As Maya stepped to the podium, her heart pounded, not with fear, but with fierce determination. She began recounting her journey, the humiliations, the doubts, her lowest moments, and the quiet, stubborn will to overcome. Her voice, steady and sincere, wove a tapestry of pain and hope. Each word seemed to strip away years of scorn, revealing strength that couldn't be ignored. Eyes that had once scorned now shimmered with empathy. Some looked away, perhaps ashamed, while others nodded in deep understanding. The impact was immediate and profound. The antagonists who had fed on her shame found themselves exposed, their cruelty laid bare within the light of Maya's courage. Their smiles faded, defensiveness replaced confidence. Some attempted to dismiss her speech as self-pity, but the room's overwhelming support silenced them. An unexpected ally, the company's CEO, stood up to commend Maya's bravery and insight, signaling a clear message: respect and empathy were values to be embraced, not scorn. This unexpected kindness stirred a poignant realization within Maya. The power to transform her reality had never truly been in the hands of others. It had resided within her steadfastness and willingness to face her truth. Her story wasn't just about suffering. It was about mastery over the storms that threatened to drown her. This turning point didn't erase the scars, but it redefined them. They became badges of survival, symbols of a woman who refused to be broken by cruelty. If you've ever felt silenced or diminished by those around you, remember, sometimes the greatest power lies in standing tall when the world expects you to fall. Maya's journey from shamed outcast to respected voice is a testament to the resilience waiting inside us all. Let it remind you that kindness can come from the most unexpected places, and healing often begins when you decide to share your story with courage.